Good evening, Cecil TV. I'm Grant Handley, your political correspondent. Hope everyone's having a great night. Got a lot of things going on. The New Hampshire primaries had just ended. The Baltimore Ravens are playing for a Super Bowl, hopefully. But tonight, we're going to talk about the growing cannabis industry in Cecil County. With cannabis sales in Maryland reaching over $800 million already through the end of 2023, and 2 new dispensaries expected to come within the next coming months, the Cecil County Council has approved new zoning regulations for the new facilities. So let's dive into it. As you know, in 2022, the midterm election posed Maryland Question 4. Was cannabis going to be legalized recreationally or not? Well, it won. By an overwhelming margin of 67% to about 33%, Question 4 passed, and recreational cannabis is here to stay in the state of Maryland starting July 1st, 2023. You guys probably already know this. You've probably noticed a dispensary in the Perryville area and a dispensary in the Elkton area. And regardless of your feelings of cannabis, it's here to stay, and it's going to be a part of the state for as long as we can imagine. So the county, towns alike, have a challenge that they're facing. How can they accommodate cannabis dispensaries with the new zoning regulations without being too discriminatory and giving too much pushback? As of January 1st, 2024, the state of Maryland and the Maryland Cannabis Commission have decided that they're going to release 2 more licenses for cannabis dispensaries in Cecil County. So I just mentioned we have the dispensary in Elkton, we have the dispensary in Perryville, but those had been here for a while because of the medical cannabis business. So the one in Elkton, the one in Perryville, they have the right to be grandfathered in, so the new zoning regulations won't apply. What becomes interesting now is, as the Maryland Cannabis Commission and the state work together to figure out the 2 new licenses coming to the county, they're also going to work with the county and municipal governments to see where are we going to fit 2 more dispensaries in the county. It gets kind of interesting because zoning challenges are very important for what municipal governments do. And you're probably wondering, okay, well, what is zoning laws? What do zoning regulations actually do? And it's pretty simple. All zoning does is making sure things are where they're supposed to be. If you ever drive around the community, you'll notice there's not a Walmart next to a church. There's not a bar or a nightclub right next to a neighborhood or a residential area of any sort. Towns in the county alike have areas. This is residential, this is business commercial, this is heavy industrial. We try to group areas the best way possible so it all makes sense in the end. With 2 new dispensaries coming, that means new zoning regulations have to be added and increased. You know, do you want to put dispensaries right off of Route 40? Do you want to put them in more industrial areas where you see warehouses? What does the state require? What can the county do? What can municipalities do? And the question is, well, it kind of depends, okay? Recently, the Cecil County Council voted favorably on Bill 2311. This is pioneering legislation that outlines how Cecil County can handle zoning for any new cannabis-related business, including growers, dispensaries, and processors. Notice those are 3 different things. You have dispensaries who merely sell the product, growers who focus on growing and cultivating cannabis, and then processors who they bridge the gap between dispensaries and growers. So those are all welcome to come to this Cecil County. It's state law. If the county or a town said no, that's not coming in our community, they'd get sued for probably a lot of money, I'd imagine. So, you have to accommodate it. So let's see what they're going to do about it. Well, the bill is interesting. Bill 2023-11, as I'd mentioned, introduces parameters such as 1 dispensary per county council district. And that gets interesting because you already have a dispensary in Elkton, and we talked about the one in Perryville. And while those are grandfathered in from zoning regulations that we'll get into in a second, they're already in those council districts. So that means there's 3 more council districts that could accommodate those 2 more dispensaries. So Northeast is open, that's District 5. You have the other half of Elkton, because Elkton's probably split down the middle. I don't have the numbers for those districts, but I'd imagine Elkton being a very popular area will probably get the other dispensary. And then you kind of have the Chesapeake City, Earlville area. That is the other district without a dispensary currently. So if I was a businessman with a dispensary, I'd imagine Northeast and the other side of Elkton would be where they'd go. More people, likely a higher customer base, more profit, things like that. None of that's confirmed at all, just kind of my speculation for what I think is going to happen. So regardless of just that parameter, it also gets interesting because the bill requires a 1 acre space requirement per dispensary. Now 1 acre is kind of a lot. You drive to Elkton, you go to Pat's Pizza or something, and that store's not on a 1 acre lot. All of those stores in that plaza aren't on 1 acre lots. So 1 acre can be a big requirement for dispensaries, which could limit where they can't be, especially when these businesses need a lot of capital to begin and start up. It costs a lot of money to start a business, especially getting to the business of cannabis. Finally, there's a lot of signage requirements, things like that. Growers and processors also have acreage requirements themselves. I believe growers is a 10-acre requirement, which is nothing to sneeze at, and processors might be around 5 acres. You can find all these parameters on Bill 2023-11. The County Council had approved it on their January 2nd legislative session. So you can look at it yourself and kind of read more of the parameters and see what happens. It gets interesting because the Maryland Cannabis Commission's job is to look at these bills like that and say, is that too restrictive or is that good to go? Because when the state says, hey, cannabis is here, you have to regulate it smartly, that's what the counties are trying to do. It's a delicate balance of preserving your community, having cannabises in places that make sense, while also not being too restrictive because that becomes illegal. You have to welcome it. You have to accommodate it to the best way possible. Just like a liquor store. You see liquor stores in places that make sense, and you see liquor stores not at places that wouldn't make any sense. Now let's talk about tax implications. Cecil County government is set to get 5% of the 9% sales tax revenue. So we're not getting 5% of sales tax revenue. They're getting 5% of the 9% sales tax that is charged on all cannabis goods. So, for example, if you were to have $100,000 worth of product, the county would get about $4,500 worth. Is $4,500 a lot? No, it's nothing. It's not a ton of money in relation to a government. But, cannabis is a rapidly growing industry, and I could very well see the numbers reaching over $1 million of products sold. And, now you're talking more money and more revenue for your local governments. It gets even more interesting if a dispensary is in a municipal boundary, the county and the municipality then split that 5%. So a town would get 2.5, the county would get 2.5. Is it a great deal? Is it awesome tax revenue? Your number one source for local government? No. But considering last year when this bill was being generated in session, until the couple days leading up to passage, there is no sales tax revenue on the board at all for municipalities. So it's a win. The Maryland Municipal League, we're pretty happy about it. And if you're a fan of local government and revenue, something you kind of feel good about. So what's going to happen? Is the Maryland Cannabis Commission going to look at the county's regulations and say, hey, this is great, we like it, no problem? Because if that's what happens, that's really great for the other municipalities. I know, for example, the town of Northeast is kind of waiting to say, well, let's see what the county government does. If they make this cannabis legislation and it works out and we like it, maybe we'll mimic and follow closely along. But if the legislation gets challenged by the Maryland Cannabis Commission, perhaps they'll have to go back to the drawing board. So the county is doing important work. It's pioneering work. It's tricky. It's navigating this kind of type of regulation. Zoning can get complicated, and there's not much precedence to go off of. So I, for one, will be watching closely how the county government operates through this process. If it passes, no problem. I bet you'll see town governments follow pretty closely along. And if it's challenged, back to the drawing board, I bet you see your municipalities kind of hold off to see what those results yield. Regardless how you feel about cannabis, it's here to stay. And it offers plenty of benefits with the tax revenue, and it's important that our communities find a way to safely and correctly zone and regulate the location of dispensaries, processors, and growers. So I encourage all of my viewers to check out your county government, check out your town governments, and watch. Zoning regulations aren't interesting, inherently. They're not a very fun, cool topic to talk about, but hey, for something like this, I think it's pretty cool. So do yourself a favor, follow it, root for the Ravens against the Chiefs this weekend. I'm Grant Handley, signing off.